Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. I think this is the first time that I'm speaking mainly to a Guyanese audience, and I want to say thank you for inviting me. There are a couple of people I would like to acknowledge. I want to acknowledge Al Parks. Al knew Walter before I did. They grew up together. Al is in the audience visiting from Germany. I also want to acknowledge some high school friends of mine, and I'm going to call you by your maiden name because my name was Patricia Henry before I became Rodney. Jazzy Payne, Cicely Wills, please stand so everybody can see you. Aubrey, because I knew you when you were trying to tackle we go back a long way, and it was really nice to catch up, especially with Cicely. I caught up with Jazzy before. And I also want to acknowledge my hosts, where I've been singing for the last 10 days, for putting up with me for that long, and today for tonight. I'm supposed to talk about, my theme is supposed to be Walter Rodney, past, present,
She's got to talk into it.
Walter Rodney's legacy, past, present, and future. It's not enough time for me to cover everything, so I'm going to try to draw a picture for you. This year, Walter Rodney would have been 77 years old. Wow. I am 77. I'm a month older than him. My daughters used to say I cradle snatch. Walter never got to see his children grow up. He was assassinated when he was 38 years old. My oldest son, Shaka, was 13, Kanini, 10, and Asha, 8. He never got a chance to meet his grandchildren, Asia, Kwesi Anthony, Kai, Sky, and Apedwa. As you know, Walter Rodney was assassinated on a Friday, June the 13th, 1980. And I want to start by using a quote from George Lamming. Walter Rodney's legacy is a living example, one that is needed today more than ever. After 34 years, there's finally a commission of inquiry into June the 13th, 1980. It is an opportunity to ask ourselves why younger generations know little, if anything, of who Walter Rodney was and what he stood for. Why copies of his children's books, Kofi Badu out of Africa and Lakshmi out of India, and there were other plans, there were a series of books, are not available in libraries or schools in Guyana. Whether the things that Rodney fought for have really been achieved today, and what our responsibilities in the face of this, remind ourselves why race continues to be an easy bogeyman to trot out. Why is it important to remind ourselves that a commission inquiry is not just about finding out what happened. We must also ask ourselves what it means to ask these questions from the vantage point of our present, and we must strongly resist those who would attempt to attach themselves to his legacy in order to reap narrow political dividends in the present. Dividends that have nothing to do with healing, reconciliation, and social and economic transformation. Dividends that Rodney ultimately gave his life to oppose. And I'm going to talk about the process of the Commission of Inquiry, and also why Rodney was killed. I think Rodney was killed because he was promoting a racial rebuilding, a healing of the Guyanese working people, Indian and black people, and that was dangerous to the state apparatus. After Rodney Walter was killed, there was never an inquiry into his death. In 1988, President Hoyt did an inquest, and the inquest, the result of the inquest said that Rodney either died by accident or misadventure. I don't know if you know what misadventure means. But economically, what happened was, if you have a clause saying misadventure, it means that the insurance company would never pay your life policy, and that's what happened. So we were not only deprived of him and his earning power and his role as a father and husband, but also financially, the family has never gotten a life insurance policy. According to the International Commission of Jurists, who visited Guyana in 1998, they said, and I quote, that the inquest was marred by grave defects, that the inquest was not a proper inquest done, or else they would not have come up with those conclusions. Again, the family is always called for an inquiry. From the day he was killed, we called for an inquiry. In 1992, under the People's Progressive Party, we again called for an inquest into his death. I spoke myself to the president at that time because I was in Guyana attending an international conference on Walter, and it was agreed that yes, we will have a commission inquiry. By the time I got back to Atlanta, I don't know what happened, but it was squashed. In 1992, my son Shaka Rodney did a one-week hunger strike in Guyana to bring attention to his father's assassination. And I use the word assassination deliberately because he was assassinated. He wasn't murdered, he wasn't killed, he just didn't die. He was assassinated. And the Commission of Inquiry report will prove that. Finally, in 2013, I was approached by President Ramatar to find out if I was still interested in a commission of inquiry. I said I'd never lost interest. That was always the point. The family needed to know. And so in 2014, the commission was formed. It took about 6 months to find competent lawyers, not just competent lawyers, but also people had the time to do a commission of inquiry. It takes a lot of time and research. 3 commissioners were finally selected. Sir Richard Cheltenham, who was the chair of the commission, Mrs. Jacqueline Samuels Brown, a Jamaican, Sir Richard is Barbadian, and Mr. Sitna Jairam, who is a Trinidadian. I think he's Guyanese Trinidadian. They were very competent people. They were all Queen's Counsels. During the commission met for about 2 years. They spent time doing the research, compiling, getting in touch with witnesses. They were able to interview 33 witnesses, including myself, and 2 in-camera witnesses. They were able to view what information was available. It's quite strange that every document related to Walter Rodney could not be found. It disappeared. totally. Somebody said there was a flood, and the documents got, but there were no documents available for Rodney during that period when he was harassed, beaten, and finally assassinated. The commission concluded its work. Well, the government changed, as you know, and the commission of inquiry was aborted. The commissioners were able to, with the evidence they have, produce a report. And the report is available online, and I could give you how to get the report. The report was issued to the government in 2016. The first thing, Guyanese are always polite people. I've heard that throughout the Caribbean. Guyanese are very polite. When the commission was ready to hand over the report to the current president, he was not there to accept it, which is a normal formality that any head of state would do. He was not present. They were told, these are senior people, more senior than he is, to hand over the report to a secretary. The report was handed to a secretary, and they had to leave Guyana very unceremoniously. The report then was passed from different people, and then finally the government acknowledged the report. They acknowledged it, they never accepted the report. So the report is somewhere lying on a shelf. The report is quite explicit on who killed Rodney. The report included finding that the actual assassin, Gregory Smith, was not acting alone, but rather was asked and abetted by the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, and the then Political Directorate in the killing of Dr. Walter Rodney. The commission described the killing as a state-organized assassination with the knowledge of Prime Minister Forbes Burnham, and that's on page 142 of the report. And I encourage people to read the report. What has been distressing for me is that very decent people have remained silent. And that is how we come to the position we're in. And you know, when people are talking about President Trump, I have seen that happen in Guyana. What Trump is doing is exactly what Burnham did, and people kept silent. And it's almost like a child. If you give them a foot, they take a yard. They check the boundaries. And I saw that happening, and people saw it, but they did nothing about it. Either because they benefited from it. I know some people had been scared, but we all have to stand up for truth. Because what do we tell our grandchildren? My little granddaughter, the youngest one, she's 3 years old, and they all ask about the grandfather. Why would somebody kill my granddad? I miss my granddad. Why would somebody just kill him like that? And we have to explain in the simplest terms about what your granddad, the kind of work your granddad was doing to help ordinary people seek a better life. So in terms of what we have called for, the family coming out of the COI report, we have said that the government need to officially release the COI report. And that's where your role comes in terms of pressuring the government. Where is the report? Why don't they want to release the report? If they say Burnham didn't kill Rodney, then they should release the report. Why are they hiding it from people? The commission also made a number of recommendations about documentation and how you keep documents, which is a good recommendation because documents were terribly kept, and is. If you go to the archives in Guyana, it's terrible about how records should be kept. Change the manner. We're demanding that the death certificate be changed. it had also on the death certificate that Rodney was unemployed. You didn't employ him, but he wasn't unemployed. His profession couldn't be unemployed. How could you put that on a death certificate? So that's what the death certificate said. 1, he was unemployed, profession, and 2, that he died by misadventure. So yeah, changed his profession on that death certificate, overturned the conviction of Donald Rodney, and expunged any related criminal history. I don't know how many of you know that Donald was charged. That charge has never been lifted. The former government wanted to pardon Donald, and Donald said, no, I don't want a pardon. I did not do anything. So we're calling on the overturned conviction of Donald Rodney. Provide reparations to the Rodney family and Donald Rodney. Rodney was killed at the highest length of his profession. He was 38 years old. I am 77. Rodney didn't have a pension. Rodney was never sick. So they need to compensate the family in some way or other. Provide a truthful account to the people of Guyana. The people of Guyana deserve better. But the people of Guyana have to demand it. Right? Provide students and leaders with Rodney's teachings and writings. A disgrace that when I go to the continent, anywhere on the continent I go, every single person, whether a farmer, taxi driver, they know Rodney. They had to read how Europe developed as undergraduate students. Then most of them said, you know, I thought Rodney was African.
And he was.
He was. Yes, he was. So that is for the Commission of Inquiry. Next I want to go to what we have done since Rodney's death in terms of the family. When I left Barbados with my 3 children, Rodney was killed on the 13th. The government refused to release his body because they had put out this news report that an unidentified man had been murdered, because that's how they planned it. They planned it so his head would be knocked off. So they put out their own media even before. They dropped a lot of pamphlets outside my house the next morning to say that it's unidentified. So they had to cover themselves. They had to withhold the body. And the body was so badly beginning to decompose, which was deliberate, that I moved it from one funeral parlor to another. And the person who took on burying Rodney was a school friend of his at Queen's College. And he said to me, Mrs. Rodney, normally I would never take a body in this condition. It's only because of Walter. Because what they had done, I went to the mortuary to see where they had put his body. And they had him at the bottom, and they had other bodies thrown on top of him, and the fridge was not working. So we had to have a covered coffin. But the thing that spooked them, Walter's face was not damaged. It had some burn marks, but I knew it was Walter. Everybody knew it was Walter Rodney. So their own lies backfired on them. So when I left Barbados, we had a memorial service before we had a funeral because they wouldn't release the body. And I said we didn't need the body to honor my husband. They could keep it because they needed it more than we needed it. Anyway, finally they handed over the body. He was buried. And the children and I, 2 friends from Barbados, George Lamin and Margaret Hope, came and took myself and the children to Barbados. I hadn't made any plans what I would do. I didn't know what I would do. I just knew I could not stay in Guyana. because it wasn't safe. And I realized it wasn't safe because when I got to Barbados, Prime Minister Burnham called up Prime Minister Tom Adams to tell him he was harboring the enemy. Me and 3 small children were the enemy. So even in Barbados, the Barbadians have to provide security while I was in Barbados because they wanted to cover themselves. So the harassment of the Rodney family didn't stop with just killing Rodney, it continued. So in Barbados, I stayed in Barbados for 9 years, and I think it's the best choice I made because both Walter and I had discussed that we wanted our children, whatever happened, to grow up in the Caribbean, to have an identity, which is very important. I've seen the tragedies of kids who are brought up other places. They don't know who they are. And so it was important. It was also a chance for us to begin to heal, for me to get the children back in school, to have some normalcy in our lives. One of the things that happened while I was in Ghana, because we had moved around so much, I had moved around with the children and Walter, I was never able to finish my first degree. I'd start, stop, start, stop. So when I got to Guyana, I was working with the I was working with the Georgetown City Council in charge of early childhood development daycare center. And I took the opportunity while I was in Ghana to go to University of Guyana, where I did a diploma in social work. And then the university, because the University of Ghana had separated itself from the University of the West Indies, it was an independent university. In order to do the degree program in social work, one had to go to Jamaica. And this was the first time students were going on this particular arrangement. So 2 students were selected from that program, myself and another person, to go to Jamaica to finish up. And it's luckily, I'm so happy that while I was away from Guyana, my parents, Walter's parents, and Walter looked after the children. So I spent a year in Jamaica. So in Barbados, that I was able to get a job where I could be at home by the time the children had finished school. If I still, because I did nursing here in England, if I was still doing nursing, then the hours would have been very problematic. So I was glad I was able to do that, to make sure that my children had some kind of pattern in their lives. We stayed in Barbados for 9 years, and then I emigrated to Canada, and it was in Canada that I continued my studies. And then people asked me several times why you took so long to start a foundation. And my priority was my children, raising my children as a single parent, finding a job, and continuing my own self-development as a woman, because that we know that several times when you're with men who are committed to politics or activism, that your work gets left undone. And so after Walter was killed, I was determined that I would continue my own education. And so the children were not old enough for us to begin to tackle Walter's work. And that vacuum allowed a lot of people to take ownership of my husband's work. Their work all over that's being plagiarized. And people who have not paid us our royalties, and this goes to Africa all over. So one of the first things we did was to try to assemble the papers in one place. And that was not as easy as I thought it would be, because we had to smuggle his papers out of Guyana. I'm sure some of it was destroyed. People had to bring it out for us, because if the government knew we were taking out, it would be problems. So it was smuggled out of Guyana and brought to me in Barbados. I couldn't keep them because they would deteriorate. So a friend offered to take them up to the US and look after them. And then subsequently I learned, and this person was an academic, subsequently I learned that the person was using Walter's papers for his own publications or giving his graduate students. And this book is a product of it. The Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution, Walter was very, I've never seen anybody take such precise notes. Walter was preparing a course on the Russian Revolution to teach students in Tanzania, a course. And he never taught the course because he was writing how Europe underdeveloped Africa, so he was focused on this rather than. And the real Russian Revolution was the Russian Revolution from a third world perspective. That is what he was writing about. So this professor gave this graduate student, Kelly, Dr. Kelly, this manuscript, it was a manuscript, it was notes, to work on. When we heard that the papers were being used, we had to move them again from there, keep them in another temporary place, and find a place that we felt comfortable with giving the papers, donating the papers. So years after, I met Dr. Kelly, and we came to an agreement where we would, because he had done a lot of work on bringing it towards a text, that we would work together and produce the Russian Revolution. So it's a view from the third world. The papers finally, when I moved, I was living in Canada, and I was recruited from Canada to Atlanta to help develop the first public health program in a historically black college and university. And once I was settled in Atlanta and talked to the archivist who knew Rodney's work, because she was the archivist at Howard University, about placing the papers at the AUC Center, the Atlanta University Center, Woodruff Library. So we donated the papers to those archives. And the reason, because several universities approached us about buying the papers. I didn't want to sell the papers. I wanted to make sure that we were being used by people who were interested and could learn from Rodney's scholarship. So that was a deliberate attempt to donate the papers to a black institution. And the Atlanta University Center covers 5 undergraduate and graduate schools. So it's quite a large consortium of universities. So we donated the papers to the Woodruff Library, and on the donation of the papers, we started the Walter Rodney Symposium, which we just completed the 16th year of the symposium, and we do it not around when he was assassinated. We deliberately do it on the week of his birth. So some days, sometimes it may fall on actually his birthday or before. And my daughter, Asha, who's the youngest, her birthday is on the 22nd of March. Walter's the 23rd. And my second daughter, Kanini, she's the 28th of March. So that March month has a lot of meaning to our family. And as David told you, the foundation is committed to sharing the life and legacy of Walter Rodney with students, scholars, and community activists. And all our symposia involve students. We always have a student panel. We always have community activists and academics. Because I'm not just interested in academics coming to add another thing to their CV. I want his work to be